King George III was the King of Great Britain and Ireland from 1760 until his death in 1820. He was born on the 4th of June 1738 and reigned for a remarkable 59 years, making him the longest reigning king in British history at the time. George III was born in London, England, and was the grandson of King George II. He ascended to the throne in 1760 at the age of 22, after the death of his grandfather. Initially, he was popular among the British people, who had very high hopes for his reign. One of the significant events during King George's reign was the American Revolutionary War. The American colonists sought independence from British rule, leading to a conflict between the colonies and the British government. George III was determined to suppress the rebellion, but ultimately the war ended in American victory, resulting in the formation of the United States of America. George III also had a strained relationship with Parliament. He believed in the power of the monarchy and desired more influence over government affairs. This led to conflicts with Parliament and frequent changes in the government. He appointed and dismissed numerous prime ministers during his reign, which contributed to political instability. He was also involved in the Napoleonic Wars, which was a series of conflicts between Britain and France under the leadership of Napoleon Bonaparte. Britain formed coalitions with other European powers to resist French expansion. Despite suffering setbacks initially, Britain and its allies eventually defeated Napoleon, establishing Britain as a major European power. In the later years of his reign, George III experienced recurring episodes of mental illness, which are believed to be symptoms of porphyria. These episodes affected his ability to rule, and his son, the future King George IV, acted as Prince Regent from 1811 until George III's death. King George III's reign had a profound impact on British history. He presided over a period of immense change, including the loss of the American colonies and the rise of the Industrial Revolution. He also played a significant role in the development of constitutional monarchy and the growth of the British Empire. His reign is often remembered for his struggles with mental illness, his role in the American Revolutionary War, and his efforts to exert control over government affairs. Despite the challenges he faced, his long reign left a lasting mark on British history. The funeral procession began at Windsor Castle, where the king had passed away. The coffin was placed in a hearse drawn by 6 horses and covered with black velvet pall, adorned by silver decorations. The funeral procession was a grand and elaborate affair, with military personnel, nobility, and members of the royal family partaking. King George III passed away on the 29th of January 1820, but it took over 2 weeks for his funeral to be held on February the 16th, 1820. This allowed ample time for all the necessary arrangements to be made for this magnificent occasion. The funeral preparations were organised by France and Beckwith, who had previously handled the funeral of Queen Charlotte less than 2 years before. According to the newspapers, this event surpassed even the grandeur of the celebrations for his Golden Jubilee in 1809 and the funeral of his late wife, Queen Charlotte, in 1818. In the past, accommodations and horses were secured on the day before the event. However, this time it was nearly impossible to find lodging anywhere, as everything was immediately booked as soon as the date was announced. Many people had to settle for sleeping on carpets instead of beds. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, several close friends of the late king's household were granted access to view the body laying in state. Shortly after, His Royal Highness the Duke of York, accompanied by Colonel Stephenson, inspected the preparations for the royal burial. An hour later, the gates were opened to the general public. Thousands of people wanted to pay their respects, resulting in somewhat a chaotic situation. Men and women of all ages were tightly pressed against each other, posing a risk to their lives. The police stationed at the gates did their best to control the masses, but their efforts were in vain. The cries of women and children echoed in every direction, and several women fainted and had to be rescued from being trampled. A detachment of artillery under the command of Colonel Cathcart, stationed in the Long Walk, began firing a salute at daybreak. They continued with 5-minute intervals of gunfire until 8 in the evening, when they switched to firing 1-minute intervals. Throughout the day, the great bell of the chapel, as well as the bells of Windsor and Eton, tolled solemnly. As soon as daylight appeared, a multitude of carriages could be seen converging on the town from all directions. During the course of the day, several thousand individuals were granted entry into the chambers where the body was placed for public viewing. However, at 3 p.m. the gates were closed, and nearly an equal number of people were unfortunately excluded from witnessing this profoundly solemn and impressive sight. At 7 p.m. His Royal Highness the Duke of York entered the room of mourning and took his seat at the head of the coffin, assuming the role of chief mourner until the body was relocated. The following morning, the various groups that had joined the procession gathered in St. George's Hall under the guidance of Sir G. Naylor. The arrangements faced initial challenges due to a larger than expected number of attendees, but eventually everything proceeded as planned. The peers entered through Elizabeth Gate and made their way to the King's Lodge, then crossing over to Kitchen Gate and entering the castle at the eastern end of the state apartments. Tickets for admission to the chapel were distributed, followed by tickets for entry to the lower yard, where a part of the procession was set to pass through. At 9:15, the coffin was brought through the different rooms, resting on the same platform used during the funeral of the late Queen. The chapel was adorned in a magnificently decorated fashion, surpassing any previous display of splendour. A raised platform extended from the south aisle up the nave to the choir, and it was covered in black cloth with foot guards positioned on either side, every second man holding a wax candle. Behind them, around 500 Eton scholars were stationed, all granted admission by special order of the now King George IV. In the north aisle, seating arrangements were made with elevated tiers for those individuals who held admission tickets. However, after 7 p.m, those tickets were deemed invalid. The choir area was also prepared to receive distinguished guests and could accommodate up to 94 people. The chapel itself was draped in black, including the knights' stalls. The altar was adorned with black hangings, and temporary seats were set up nearby for foreign ministers and other notable individuals attending the procession, such as the Duke of San Carlo, Count Leven, and Baron Linsingen. The communion table was covered with gold plates sourced from both the Chapel Royal in London and the Chapel Royal in Windsor. Above the royal mausoleum, a canopy made of luxurious blue velvet was placed. At its top, a golden crown rested on a cushion, while a Gothic scroll with festoons adorned the border, displaying the royal arms. This arrangement remained in place for several days, allowing the public to view it. The sight of the procession descending the grand staircase of the castle, accompanied by banners and more, was reported to be remarkably striking. Those admitted to the lower courtyard enjoyed a full view of the processions, and upon the processions reaching the great gate of St. George's Chapel in the south aisle, the King's body was received by the Dean of Windsor, and the organ immediately played the hymn, "I am the resurrection and the life saint the Lord." The funeral service composed by Dr. Croft and Mr. Purcell commenced, and the procession entered in an orderly manner. The royal body was placed on a platform with crowns and cushions placed upon it. His Royal Highness the Duke of York, serving as the chief mourner, occupied the position at the head of the corpse, with supporters on either side. The royal princes sat near the chief mourner, and the Lord Chamberlain and His Majesty's household took his place at the feet of the corpse. Around 9 a.m. the first segment of the procession entered the south aisle, and it took until a little after 10 a.m. for everyone to be seated within the chapel. The ceremony itself lasted approximately an hour. King George III was interred in the chamber beneath St George's Chapel, alongside other members of his family, including Princess Amelia, his wife Queen Charlotte, and Princess Charlotte, the daughter of George IV, who was Prince Regent at the time of her death in 1817.